What happens when you mix legal expertise, investment banking, and a strategic eye for compliance? You get Brett's story. Today's guest, founding partner of Bright Horn Partners and Bright Horn Securities, board member, advisor, and M&A expert. On this episode of The Compliance Advantage, we dive into real-world impact of compliance on deals, valuation, and what healthcare CEOs need to know before going to market. If you're thinking of selling or a healthcare CEO navigating growth and regulatory complexity, keep listening for key insights that could save and make you millions.
Welcome to the Compliance Advantage podcast. This is the place where we help at-risk stakeholders in healthcare transform compliance into a strategic advantage. I'm your host, Ross Ronan, founder of Ronan Healthcare Compliance and a healthcare compliance strategist with nearly 30 years of industry experience. I'll help you transform compliance into a catalyst for innovation and growth. Remember, compliance pays dividends. Invest today. Today, we'd like to welcome Brett's story to the Compliance Advantage. Thanks for coming on today.
My pleasure. Good to be here.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about yourself and where you're coming from today.
So I'm a recovering lawyer.
Oh,
I
nice.
went to law school down in South Florida and practiced with an emphasis on practice for 5 or 6 years before moving back here to Denver. Okay. I started my career as a trial attorney and then transitioned into corporate and securities law, which is where I got my flavor for working with privately held companies, doing mergers and acquisitions, which is what I do now. But in the entire course of my professional career, compliance and regulations has been something that is omnipresent and always part of what I do.
Yeah, and this is the first for the Compliance Advantage to have someone who's not necessarily in the healthcare arena on the show. And so I love the fact that we get this opportunity to dig into some really M&A pieces of it that come from the banking side as well as sell side and buy side. Probably you have a little bit of that context, although I know you have experience in selling or buying or healthcare entities as well. But I'd love to hear this side of it. And a lot of our listeners who are in healthcare are part of this process all the time. Like, am I being acquired? Am I not being acquired? Am I getting ready to be acquired? What do I need to look for? And especially on the compliance side of it. So I appreciate you going into this stuff. So
yeah, my pleasure.
Yeah. What made you not want to continue on with law? Because I'm a recovering law school grad myself.
It's a great background to have.
Yep.
And I'm very thankful that my parents were able to afford to put me through law school. And certainly there are elements of it I really enjoyed. I was an athlete growing up, and there's kind of a competitive dynamic, especially in litigation, that was attractive. But ultimately, I'm somebody who's more suited to business development, to client relationships, and maybe less so to drafting contracts and documents. And so the financial crisis hit the GFC in 2008, which was the time of my last M&A law job. And I got laid off because there was no M&A. People were wondering about what was going to happen in the world. And I sort of took that opportunity to do some self-assessments, not only sort of introspection, but also some of these self-assessment tools that led me to investment banking, because I love helping the business owner sellers that we work with. I just don't want to be the one drafting the legal agreements. But it's a great background to have because it allows me to be pretty effective at issue spotting during the due diligence phase, including around regulatory and compliance issues.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, it's very similar. I was a nurse and went to law school, and people ask me the same thing. Why'd you go to law school? And I'm like, I stayed at a Holiday Inn Express last night. I thought it was a good idea. It's one of those things. Tell us a little bit about Bright Horn Partners and Bright Horn Securities. Tell us about the company.
We've been around for 15 years. I feel very blessed to have met my two partners, Bobby and Andrew. We worked on a deal together and found we had a lot of shared values and alignment on who we wanted to help and how we wanted to do that. So over the years, we've steadily dragged ourselves upstream. And right now we specialize in working with privately held companies, call it 10 to 100 million of revenue. There's some outliers there. We've gone a little bit downstream if you're talking about a SaaS business, and we've done greater than 100 million. But really, it's those family and founder-owned companies where they're looking for that first big win. For many of these people, this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to sell a portion or all of their business, and they hire us to get them ready for market, take them to market, allow them to continue to focus on running the company, and then solicit a number of options for them in terms of types of buyers, and maximize terms and get the deal closed. So it's been a great run. We'll do 3 to 5 deals a year. We're just over $800 million of total deals that we've done, which is a lot of 10s and 20s and 30s over the years. But it's been a great business. And then we also own, speaking of compliance, we own a FINRA and SEC licensed broker dealer, which is the regulatory body that allows us to do what we do, and we provide outsourced regulatory support for other investment bankers around the country.
Great. Dealing with, I call them mid-sized to smaller companies, especially founder-based, companies that are wanting to do something more, grow, sell, get bigger. Compliance issues always circle around these kind of founder-based businesses because, in my experience, whether it's healthcare, finance, whatever it may be, there's so much emphasis on running the business, growing the business, and doing that. You don't get to take a moment to say, what should I do from the regulatory standpoint? What should I do from the protection standpoint? And how do I protect myself when I get ready to go to market, when I get ready to get the highest valuation of what it is? So we talk about the compliance advantage, and this is what I want to get into today, is how do those companies with the founders and the CEOs, how do they really look at compliance to leverage the benefits that they could have for their companies for things like this, like a big sale, right? So we'll dive into that a little bit more as we go along. When we look at like leadership or things that have inspired you, is there a book, philosophy, mentor that really has changed your approach to the way that you do things, especially running a business?
Yeah, and there are a number of these sort of self-assessments, but the first one I did was Jeffrey Gitmer's Strengths Finder.
Okay.
And there are probably 9 or 10 now different editions of this, but it really forced me at a transition time in my life professionally to realize what got me excited, what I was good at, what I wasn't good at, and therefore, seek opportunities that maximize those strengths. So there's a lot, but that's one that comes to mind that, I always encourage people to look at, especially people that are exploring their next options professionally or figuring out ways to get to the next level.
I'll pick it up. I love reading all those books. So that's great. Thank you. Great. Yeah. All right. When you think about compliance, what is the common or the biggest misconception that most people have when it relates to compliance programs and having one? What is that misconception that people have about compliance in general?
It's that I can get to it later. You touched on something that's very astute, which is these business owners who start a company, and especially the ones that are growing quickly, their hair's on fire and they're wearing a lot of different hats and they're doing a ton of different stuff. Their sales, their marketing, their HR, their payroll. And a lot of times compliance and regulatory items generally are something they know in the back of their mind they need to address, but believe that they can put off, sort of in the mantra of, I will ask for forgiveness rather than permission. The problem is those issues will metastasize and become, go from a small issue that you need to just take your medicine and knock it out on a weekend to something that can crater the business, or at the very least make it extremely difficult and damaging when it comes to exploring raising capital or a sale. So it's really getting those processes and systems in place. If you are in an industry where compliance and regulation are just the cost of doing business, do it early and be regimented and diligent about keeping up with it.
Do you have conversations with them about, before they get to that inflection point where they really want to go to market? Do you have conversations with them to say, look, you need to invest in the program today, in your compliance program today, put money aside? We tell this to all our clients. It's like, I don't care who you pay, what you pay, whether it's us or somebody else, put whatever dollar amount that is into your budget and set it and forget it. Because if you don't, you'll never take the time to be able to put those into place. Do you have those conversations?
Yeah, we do. Now, often we are only really diving in on a business in the, call it 6 months or less leading up to them saying, Brett, Bright Horn, we're ready to go to market. But I'm maintaining relationships and cultivating relationships years in advance of a company being ready for market. So whenever I'm having those conversations, whether it's taxes, whether it's compliance and regulatory, I'm reminding them to begin to get their house in order because it is a real fire drill once you're out at market trying to play catch up. And the sophisticated buyers that are writing 7 and 8 figure checks are going to tick these boxes around compliance, and you need to be organized.
So even if you jump in 6 months prior, right, 6 months prior to going, is it beneficial for them to at least start the process on a valuation perspective once they get to that LOI side of it and they're ready to make a deal? Is it beneficial for them to start even 6 months, or as opposed to just saying, hey, we'll do it after?
No, it's beneficial to start before. And we've told people to push pause on going to market if we don't think they're ready. It is a seller's market. There's $6 trillion of private equity dry powder.
There's a lot of money out there
for deals. All that to be said, though, that good companies are going to command a premium, and good companies is more than just revenue and profitability. It's how organized you are, how low risk you are from a compliance or regulatory standpoint because you have your house in order. So we've told clients, look, we know you want to go to market now, but you need to get this compliance or regulatory item buttoned up. Maybe you've got an outstanding inquiry with one of the regulators. Let's see that through. So at the very least, we can manage it with the buyer to say, look, this open item with the state is going to remain open, but there's ways we can contract around it. There's ways you can insure around it with what's called reps and warranties insurance. But we don't take somebody to market unless they're pretty buttoned up.
That's interesting, and to your point, if you want the full valuation that you think you deserve as a founder, right? Because everybody who builds their business always thinks their stuff is just the best and the best and the best and should get 10, 12 multiples, right? With a gap in having, we always say, if you don't have a compliance program, you don't know what you don't know, right? You don't know, you're not picking up rocks, you're not digging into things. You don't know what's happening unless you have a state issue, a DOL issue, a tax issue, or something that comes through to tell you that you have these issues. You don't know what you don't know, and somebody will find it during diligence.
Yeah, we had a healthcare deal early in our iteration as Bright Horn, and they used a lot of outsourced nursing help in the Philippines. These nurses were doing a variety of things. A lot of it was medical coding and some of that sort of more clerical type work, but they ran into a labor issue in the Philippines, and the owner, it wasn't even on her radar that the Philippines would have labor laws, which to me as a lawyer, I mean, I understand they may be different, but you would think that would be something they would have looked into. Sure. And it all worked out because they addressed it and got, the good news is that the financial exposure was also fairly de minimis relative to the overall size of the deal. But that's a good example of just not knowing what you don't know, but then having to address it during the deal process.
It's unfortunate you have to do that during the deal process, right?
Right.
It'd be nice to have it nice and clean.
Yeah.
So when you think about compliance, and a lot of stuff we do in compliance, I say this a lot, is self-made problems, whether it's healthcare compliance or financial compliance or whatever it may be. When the government has always come back and said, you need a compliance program, you need to be able to do this, a lot of the compliance officers of the world, kind of was like, oh my God, I just got anointed by all the powers that may be. And now I'm a compliance officer, I'm a compliance executive, and I'm a hammer running around looking for a nail to pound, right? When you think about that, if there's something you could change about the way compliance is perceived in the industry, don't care what industry it is, well, how would you change it? What would that change be?
Yeah, I think it comes down to a misalignment of incentives between, the compliance department, which is in some respect like the teacher and the rest of the organization, especially sales and marketing, which
Sure.
are really the rowdy students, right?
Right.
They're the ones that are trying to close deals, paperwork be damned.
Yep.
Let's just get it because I'm going to make my commission and on to the next one. And they feel like they're being hamstrung by compliance and regulatory. Similarly, compliance and regulatory view sales as cowboys that don't care about getting fined and all this stuff. Certainly from a financial standpoint, if there's a way to align those two groups and then just have a dialogue that, look, this compliance stuff is annoying. We all understand it's annoying, but here's how it'll help the company's bottom line and ultimately your bonus or what have you. But it's a natural tension in any regulated business. And you know, it's something that's just going to continue to increase kind of regardless of where regulations go broadly under this administration or any next one. History has proven that they tend not to go away. The best that we can maybe hope for is that they don't increase at the same rate as they have been, but it's part of nearly every industry.
This episode of the Compliance Advantage podcast is brought to you by Ronan Healthcare Compliance. At Ronan Healthcare Compliance, we believe in transforming healthcare compliance from a checkbox attitude to a strategic advantage. With decades of expertise, our team of consultants provides innovative solutions tailored to your organization's unique needs. We don't just help you meet your standards. We elevate your business, ensuring ethical practices are at the heart of what you do. Whether you're navigating complex regulations or seeking to enhance your compliance strategy, Ronan Healthcare Compliance is your partner in achieving excellence in healthcare compliance. Ronan Healthcare Compliance, redefining compliance, empowering leadership. Visit us at ronanhc.com to learn more. Now, back to the show.
Yeah, when compliance is a strategic partner with marketing, sales, CEO, leadership, whatever it may be, I mean, the world's their oyster, right? The partnership goes beyond what you could vision. And we often think of it, compliance, we talk about the compliance advantage a lot. It also can be seen as a profit protector, right? All the money that you've made, all the money that you're doing, you don't want to pay fines and penalties and fees and things like that. And if sales and marketing, for that example, if they saw compliance that way, it is like, okay, I can still protect all these sales that I just made for this company and I get my big commission checks and I don't have to give any of that back because of some fine or penalty. Wow. This is a great partnership we need to have.
Yeah. And it's a barrier to entry too.
Right.
So it's a competitive dynamic and it can protect company A and company B who offer the same product or service, especially in something like healthcare.
Yeah.
If company B's compliance program is just, through the roof better, they're going to win more deals. Even in our industry, being regulated by FINRA and the SEC is annoying, and it comes with costs and it comes with friction, but it's also something that we rely on to win great new clients because they realize that we've had to jump through a bunch of hoops, take a bunch of tests. We've got continuing ed. We've got all this stuff that certifies that we know what we're doing. And moreover, they've got recourse and can complain to somebody if we don't do our job. So it's an advantage.
I love that too. And we call that preferred partner status. Right. And it really does increase the competitive advantage when it comes to, you can say that you're good. And plus, when you deal with regulators and they know you have an effective compliance program, the regulators start looking at you differently too. I read a statistic the other day that companies with very strong, effective, and operationalized compliance programs see 30% less audits and investigations that go on, and they save about 50% of their legal and other expenses associated with fighting those. And that's a huge dollar amount when you're talking about some of these big firms.
Or small firms.
Or small firms, yes, sure.
We're that exact case study. We were in one bucket with FINRA where we were being audited every 3 years. They realized that we knew what we were doing, that our business was low risk, and we had a great compliance program in place. We got kicked down to a lower risk bucket. Now it's every 5 years. These audits were costing us on average $75,000 to $100,000 in legal. which for a small firm every 3 years is meaningful enough.
Absolutely.
What did that allow us to do? It allowed us to make a new hire.
Mhm.
It allowed us to spend some more on marketing and grow our business. And that was all because we took the compliance piece seriously.
Oh, incredible. No, that's a great analogy. I appreciate that. What was one of the biggest aha moments? And I think you might just have actually said it, so we may dovetail into this. What was the biggest aha moment where you realized that having compliance and the compliance functionality, and you have your own branch of that, really was a advantage to either your organization or one of your clients' organizations? What was that aha moment that you had?
For me, it was a mental pivot from looking at the regulators in an antagonistic fashion. That was a function of a lack of maturity. It was a function of my background as a litigator in thinking about an us versus them.
Mm-hmm.
Why are they bothering us? Go find Bertie Madoff, stop bothering little Bright Horn partners,
Right.
to viewing them as a partner and taking a much more collegial approach, being overly accommodating with answering their questions, and really trying to get them to understand our unique business, because it is very unique, which has paid dividends immensely in terms of them now seeing us as fairly low risk and largely staying out of our hair, other than the every 5 years that they're required by the regulations to look into us. So it was just a mindset shift around viewing them as partners as opposed to adversaries.
So it's a little unfortunate that, and I hope people who are listening realize this, that it doesn't take a big event or something where that should make you realize that you need a compliance program. Like you said, you're on the list for the government to be looking at you and auditing you every year, which is costing you $75,000 to $100,000 every time you audit. That's a huge expense. Unfortunately, you had to go through that to go, hey, I'm proven to have this thing that helps protect us and not create fraud, waste, and abuse. And I hope people realize that there's steps you can take up front to make sure that you don't get yourself into those positions. But there's lots of people who need to experience first. I'm one of those people too. I need something to happen to me first, and then I go, oh, yeah, I guess I shouldn't have done that. But I preach it all the time on the compliance side of it. It's so important that people do realize that an ounce of prevention can save all kinds of dollars in the back end. Another statistic that I read the other day, every $1 spent on compliance statistically saves about $6 of revenue every dollar that you spend, which is a huge amount of money when you think about it.
Yeah, and sometimes it's the death by a thousand cuts too, where compliance bleeds over into stuff like cybersecurity. And you think about, if you hold sensitive personal information, we do as a firm, obviously healthcare, HIPAA, all that stuff. If you have some sort of breach, you are on the hook, depending on the state, for paying for credit reporting for 10,000 individuals, 100,000 individuals at $9 a month for 5 years. I mean, that can bankrupt a company, and it can be relatively prevented or protected against by just a good solid compliance program. Who's got access to the information? Where is it stored? How is that access? Teaching people not to click on strange links or social engineering. So yeah, it's not just the big event. It can be a minor event that in aggregate is pretty major.
Small investment up front saves you a lot in the backside of it. And it's great to hear from you who sees this from the standpoint of these firms wanting to get acquired. All right. So I love this question. It's really hard to answer sometimes, but if compliance was a superhero, what would it be, or a superpower?
If compliance was a superpower, it would be kind of omniscience, in terms of having a full knowledge of what's going on and the importance of making sure that everything talks together. So that's the best I could do. That is a tough question.
It's a tough question, and everybody wants to see into the future and do all those things. So it's a good answer. And I think it's really in line with a lot of people. So, as we talk about, you're advising founders and CEOs and maybe even some board members, or if you get to them to say, this is how we take your company to the next level, or this is how we take it for sale. What's the best advice that you would give them to make sure that they understand all the things that we talked about today, making an investment, protecting yourself up front, being proactive, what's the best advice you'd give them, or do you give them?
It's having a very clear set of goals that is a product of whatever stakeholders are involved, whether that's just two partners who own the business 50-50 who have made the decision to sell, or it's a larger organization where there's board level or employee representatives and so on and so forth, because that will drive a successful M&A process. And there's all of the blocking and tackling around compliance and due diligence and financials and taxes and legal, but being able to drive that on the back of clear goals, because I would say that at least half, maybe not quite half of our last 20 deals did not go to the top bidder. It went to a group that was obviously competitive on the financial side, but ticked a bunch of other boxes. And for every seller, that can be something different. It can be, I care about what happens to my employees, or I want to stay involved with some equity. And to do so, I want to still be in control of running day-to-day operations. Or it can be, I see a growth path by opening in a new geography. Is this buyer going to put in some growth capital to help me get there? So it's having a clear set of goals. The first two questions we ask is, why are you selling, or why are you contemplating a sale, and why now? Right. And unless they've got really good answers to those two questions, they're not ready. Because the thing that you'll find is this process is difficult. It's stressful. Fear, greed, all of the human emotions come out. And some people won't pull the trigger unless they've got real clarity as to why they're doing it.
Interesting. Yeah. I think that's really important to be able to have those discussions at a very high level with those individuals, especially when they don't know the reason why, right? It's just such a big event to be able to do. We deal with a lot of due diligence, and both sell side and buy side. And really those people who are the most successful really have got all of their ducks in a row, and they're ready to go, and they're ready to move themselves to the next level.
Yeah. And have a good answer for what comes next. Now, 3/4 of our sellers are selling, call it 60 to 80% of the company, remaining involved and getting a second bite at the apple with a strategic or financial buyer. But for those that are not going to remain involved, that may transition out after 6 months or a year, what comes next? Are you going to start a charity? Are you going to travel the world? Are you going to become a scratch golfer? Like, whatever the answer is, because for so many of our clients, the business is so intertwined with their sense of identity. They're known as Jane or Joe who own XYZ Co. And once they no longer own XYZ Co., what is Jane and Joe? Like, what is that identity? And so that is a very important part of what we do, is getting people to think about what's next. And you do that in conjunction with their financial advisor, with their spouse or partner. And that's a huge piece of the psychology that goes into it.
When you talked a little bit about the founders, what do they want to do, and the fact that this is their livelihood, and they are so wrapped up into the being of their business, and that really is their essence. I find when we deal with a lot of founders that when they do have a compliance issue that comes up, it's absolutely devastating for them, because it's like, this is something against you personally. And when they're unprepared for it, it hurts even worse.
Absolutely. Yeah. And then you think about the power imbalance sometimes between the regulators who have unlimited deep pockets all the time in the world. A lot of times will dive into minutia that the business owner thinks is just irrelevant. And they do take it personally. I've even felt that during our FINRA audits, when I'm asked a question that is just like, what are you guys getting at here? But yeah, you just have to really support them and encourage them to see this as just, part of doing business, and to get it over with as quickly as they can.
Well, they're not nice about it either, and they're very accusatory, and they should be, right? Yeah, that's kind of what their deal is. One last question. I ask this to all my guests. Health is wealth, we call it. What do you do to take care of yourself on a daily basis? Being in banking and investment banking has got to be stressful.
It is. One of the best things I've started doing, well, I've done it for probably 5 years now, is block off 60 to 90 minute intervals in the middle of the day to go on long walks.
Nice.
I do all the requisite stuff, go to the gym, try and eat right, get sleep. But these walks, sometimes I'm listening to podcasts, sometimes I'm listening to music. It really resets me. The steps are great to burn calories, but it's really the mental side that's been a really cool kind of hack for me to reset the day, to re-energize, to think about bigger problems instead of getting lost in emails, to learn some new stuff, podcasts or audiobooks. So that's one of my favorite things, is to go down here to the river downtown and just walk along there for 60 or 90 minutes if weather permitting, which we're fortunate in Colorado. That's most days, other than maybe last week.
I was going to say
really
last couple of weeks.
Yeah.
My wife and I just are in the middle of wrapping up 75 hard, and our 45 minutes is a 45-minute walk. So we probably have passed each other quite a bit down the river. So
that's great.
Brett, thank you so much for being here today. Great insight. Long overdue is having you here. So I really appreciate your insight on all the things compliance and the financial and banking side of it.
It was my pleasure. This was fun.
Great. Thanks. Thank you for listening to today's episode of the Compliance Advantage podcast. If you enjoyed it, please rate, review, and share this episode with someone who might benefit from it. Don't forget to visit us at ronanhc.com for more resources and connect with us on social media for the latest updates. And remember, compliance pays dividends. Invest today.